Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for being here. If you're in chat, what will happen is that we'll have a short presentation. After the presentation, while it's ongoing, put any questions you have, and I will get to them as Mrs. Steve puts them in order and holds them for us. And as always, while you're in chat, be respectful of families, mods, and each other, and enjoy your time here. Tonight, we're going to be discussing BTK and some of the news that's out there about potential other victims, and is he linked, and is how much of a suspect he is in some of these crimes that are being focused on by law enforcement. And as people, have general ideas and speculations about these cases, of course, all of us in the social media world and the web sleuth world, it's easy for us to jump to conclusions and have our own opinions. And of course, that's what we want to have and debate these issues. And what is the final answer? That will come up and be answered by law enforcement. The CSI, the technologies, the DNA evidence will lead us there eventually. But with our platforms the way they are now, of course, everybody has the ability to put their 2 cents in there, and absolutely should, as long as it doesn't interfere with the case itself, as far as overshadowing and causing issues for law enforcement. With that being said, if you do have any information about any of these victims, or you remember something or have some knowledge about any type of evidence, make sure the law enforcement has that information. And it just, of course, we're focused on BTK tonight, but that's for any crime that you may be aware of where someone was harmed or possibly a victim of a homicide. For law enforcement needs that key information and the details to make sure that justice is always served for those victims and their families. But tonight, of course, this is the individual that we're speaking of, Dennis Rader. He's currently been sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences for the homicides of 10 people from 74 to 1991. And, that's a long career, just those, 17 years of potential victims. And over 17 years, of course, 10 is quite a number of victims, but I would expect that he has a higher count. Now, a lot of people look at the way that he spoke up about the crimes he committed, the deal he made with the courts, expressing how and what the life as a serial offender was, how he selected and targeted victims, and how his whole life was not only focused on the fantasies and his victims, but it was also in how he kept a journal of his exploits and victims and certain things that he was doing. Now, are there other victims out there? I would believe so. Are all of them listed? I don't know if at what point he kept that journal, and how many victims or other types of crimes that are supporting of a budding serial offender that would go out and victimize these victims, target these victims, and that learning curve. So he would probably, and that's just my opinion, that he will have during those learning curves and prior to his first 4 victims, that he would have had other victims and of different crimes and possibly even homicides as he traveled, for the fact that it's often the case that you will have these budding offenders commit certain crimes, and in those early cases is where they make the mistakes. When we look at his first 4 victims, the Ortega family, that how many mistakes were made within that, and it doesn't appear that there were a lot. And he came in, he was highly organized, and he wasn't knocked off his game by, of course, he says he was only going there with the looking for one victim, but he was surprised when the husband and the other children were there. But it didn't knock him off his game plan. And and that is a strange occurrence in the life of planning and executing. Because even law enforcement, when we go in, we plan certain activities and dynamic entries and raids. We always run up against things that are surprises. And generally, they don't run as smoothly as what it does in the movies. There can be a lot of issues, but it doesn't appear that when Rader first started his documented known victims, that he made any mistakes, that he was able to um, maintain control regardless of the number of victims. And that was due to that he was organized and, of course, brought the weapons and the tools needed to make sure that he was able to maintain control. So, looking at it from that aspect, and as I've always looked at BTK, and I've mentioned throughout how much I've studied this case and this individual, um, some of his narcissistic issues and his thirst for attention is, of course, what led to his downfall. But that was going to happen regardless if he hadn't reached out to the media and wanting that attention due to the advances in technologies and DNA that were coming about. That eventually the DNA would have caught up with him, but due to his wanting to be in the spotlight, that we can look at some of the statements that he made, such as his desire for the attention. And when he wrote one of part of a 2-page letter of how many people do I have to um, before I get my name in the paper or some national attention. So he was in a race against himself and also against other offenders that were being recognized across the country during this time, such as Green River. Um, uh, you had the Golden State, and you would, of course, had Ted Bundy. And he wasn't getting the attention. And so, just from this one statement during this period, that of when he wasn't getting all that attention, and his desire was that he wanted to be the focus. And of course, that's just part of his narcissistic um, state of mind. And as he progressed, and of course, there's a lot of different things that we can talk about with BTK and look at some of his victims and things. But and we may go in and look more towards certain crimes that he committed, of individual crimes, and how he committed, and what went well and what didn't go well at certain points, because there were times throughout his that some victims were able to upset his cart and not allow him to have absolute full control, and a few missteps. But all in all, BTK was extremely organized all the way up to the point of his capture, and not educating himself about uh, that law enforcement would lie to him to capture him. But that's due to that these people believe that they're the brightest, smartest people, not only in the room but in the world, for the fact that they believe that they're committing these perfect types of crimes, and they don't realize of where the sciences are going and the abilities of law enforcement and working as a team and finding those clues and the technological advances that we have. Now, these future offenders, a lot of them will look at BTK and see some of the things that he did, and they're going to learn from this. They're going to learn about what happens when you seek attention. They're going to learn about when BTK talks about that the type of offender he was and having that type of assault oriented MO, that he was driven for those desires to be fed, that he couldn't pull away from certain things that he had to commit during those crimes. And some of the things that he did absolutely were hidden. Um, he denied certain acts that were committed at some of these crimes, especially with the first four victims of when the girl that was in the basement, and certain acts that were committed, and certain body fluids that were found on her body, which he says that he wasn't motivated and didn't assault her in such a manner. But um, we can't take these people for their words. And when we try to rationalize and we say, well, he was so proud of everything he did and he was so forthcoming that we should trust him. Absolutely not. This man here, his morals, he has none. He is self serving. As he tells his story, he is doing this to the court. He is getting satisfaction from his storytelling to the courts. He's reliving these events. He's the center of attention. That's what he wants. And will he release all his information? No, I don't believe so. And because that's going to feed him that, yes, they only have the power over me and can only sentence me to what I have and I tell them about. This is all they have on me. And once he realizes and sees that, yes, I was able to meet these 10, and I know there's links to them. And do I suspect that he has others? Yes. And as law enforcement has looked at some of these newer cases, and they think that they will be able to look at and see and tie him into some more, I believe that will be the case. But one of the, as you, anyone, when you research this, you'll see that when he's talking to and asking law enforcement about communicating with them, that if they would be able to trace him back by the floppy disk. And of course, they uh, misrepresented, lied to him about that. No, it would be okay. And it's one of those odd coincidences, and and they do occur, and far more than what we like to, but mathematically, at some point, coincidences have to end. But he did choose that the message in the newspaper should be, Rex, it will be okay. And we have to think about the Long Island serial offender that started way back then, also, and the parallels, and Rader, picking the name Rex. Absolutely unbelievable of that coming out and coming forth, and quite interesting statement in and of itself of one of those coincidences. But law enforcement is, as they go into this investigation and they're finding these things, and we have to look at these, that they release news and for the web sleuths and social media, news media, everyone out there, so that as they present certain evidence and some of these items, that they have pictures that this individual took of items, trophies that he collected, and um, how many trophies does he have, and when did he start collecting trophies, and what did those trophies serve and signify. There's a lot of different things, but um, law enforcement is going to present those and that information so that people can look at them and possibly associate him with other victims. I think there's some type of agreement that has been offered to him that he'll step forward in these other jurisdictions, that, of course, the maximum penalty will be taken off of the table, and it would just be something added on to his current sentencing. Which I hope that's not the case in all of them, and hopefully DNA will catch up to him on other victims, because there's some scary things about this individual's past, and how organized this individual was. And admiring him is not the word. We should look at it, analyze, and understand that these predators, and I consider him a super predator. He's at the top of the most organized, critical thinkers out there. And we'll talk about that in a minute, about some of the things and places he put himself of where he could data mine for future victims. And so that he would have these projects. And as he traveled, and he always put himself in the position of where he could collect the most data with the least amount of exposure, as far as um, uh, finding new victims to target and projects. And so we'll look at those, and you have to look at it and learn from it that we are all exposed to this type of predator. No matter how safe you think you are, there are certain individuals out there that through their background, their services, their career, their choices, that they can beat the system. And he beat the system for quite a while. But eventually, like I said, he led to his own demise, which we have to thankfully accept. But one of the victims that has come up, and you can go on Reddit and go on all these other social media platforms, and of course, Rader is a suspect in it, but there are certain law enforcement agencies also say that he's no more of a suspect than other suspects they have on the list. And we have to appreciate the open-mindedness of the officers that are looking at it. But if you gave me a list of 10 people, and no one else had the background or the homicides with that he has, but all of them had the equal opportunity to commit this crime, and Dennis Rader is on the list, Dennis Rader is going to be at the top of my list. Just, that if he's within 20 miles of any of these victims at any point and has access to any possibility of crossing paths with that victim, he's going to be at the top of my list. As you'll see that uh, at the time of her missing, he was had a job performance within the state, and of some critical data. And did he use any of that, or was it a chance encounter? There's absolutely possibilities, and law enforcement may say that he's not the prime suspect, although certain people are reporting he is the prime suspect, even with Garber, but not so much um, uh, through the eyes of some of the law enforcement. But of course, she was first known as Grace Doe until the DNA, and she finally uh, identified. But there were some similarities um, between when she was found um, and her body was discovered, of some of the bindings. And she was bound by multiple types of binding material, which is extremely interesting, of making do with what is that you either brought to the scene to bind her with, and that was he reliving some of his other crimes through this using different types of binding materials, all on one victim. Was this more of a signature that because we don't know exactly how the bindings were used and in what order, and but I would look at it from the point that if you have multiple bindings of different materials, is there a message within that? Is he out there proclaiming, how many people do I have to uh, be the victims of a homicide before I'm recognized? Because we can look at the Zodiac. He would put a scorecard up there and write on a vehicle or on a wall, or send messages into the news media and making certain statements. So are these multiple bindings a statement? And or or is it part of his plan to confuse the issue? There's several different ways to argue it, and that's what we would do from the law enforcement perspective. We would look at it from, okay, how many victims out there we have that's been tied up with these different types of materials, these bindings, and like I said, is this a message? We don't know. I don't have the information on that, but I did find it extremely interesting from the multiple types of binding, because once someone's bound, there's no need to uh, be redundant and reinforce bindings unless there's a reason for it. And I just don't know, but I did find it extremely interesting, um, uh, even down to the coaxial cable attached to the right, the right sleeve of the jacket. Extremely interesting. But uh, one of the things I was talking about, that he always put himself in the position of data mining, of where he could either through his security, when he worked for that security firm, and put a firm of putting alarms into certain residential banking areas, um, of of that security company at that time, giving him access to homes, knowing how to get in and out of systems, knowing telephone numbers, knowing the possibly from the records of the security applications of doing work in these homes, who were the victims, were single, females, or that hit his profile for one of his projects. Extremely interesting if he could do that. And then we find that at the time that Garber homicide occurred, that Rader was in Missouri, and he was working as a manager supervisor for the Census Bureau, which is once again uh, putting yourself in a position of being able to gather data information of who lives within residences, and putting yourself in that position, or tagging along when others are there, or just looking at the files and doing it for a purpose. Um, you know, of course, during this time period, he only has 10 victims, so he says. But is that the truth? And I don't think so. I think he had far more victims than that. And hopefully, we'll be able to find some of that out. And law enforcement will follow up on some of these things. And hopefully, they do come to some type of conclusion about his total count. And, but, there's a lot of people that says that he's a bragger and he will absolutely admit to any and all his crimes. I don't think so. It's all about power, and once you tell them everything you no longer have all the power. And I think he will always hold something back. That's just my 2 cents about it. Um, but he also, in part of his journal, that he had his projects, and one of the cases that we're looking at, of course, is the girl that was taken from the laundry, who was a victim and possibly a potential victim of BTKs. And his unpublished book manuscript, um, that he had intended to write, and how he was ever going to publish and get it out there, and in what manner, um, or was it just for him to relive in so many different ways, and to um, revel in his power of being able to do this? Because this is an individual, when he traveled, he had some weird activities of taking pictures of himself uh, in certain situations that he would stage and relive. And while he's traveling and he's dressing up and reliving some of these crimes, and he's becoming excited, um, he's going to be doing some other things other than just dress up. We have our children that when they'll go into, as young kids come up, and they like to play cops and robbers, dress up, whatever. But they do that to fulfill their life enjoyment and things. Well, this offender, he's doing the same thing, but he's an adult, and it's very sinister. And he's doing the dress up and things, and it is exciting him, and he will act if that triggers him in certain ways. He will go out and find a victim, and I do believe that was the case. Then, of course, we have where Cynthia Kenny, who was a teenager that was last seen at a laundromat in '76, and that's one of the cases law enforcement is really looking at now due to some of the articles that's in some of the images that they're trying to link to her, and that Rader company was doing some work within the area of that laundromat, and he makes mention of being in the that he was outside the Wichita area and on one of his projects, and that it was a bad wash day. And then, of course, he mentions in there that the laundromat is a perfect place for you to go and analyze certain events and dream. And so when he spots a target, and of course within a laundromat, you know, during that time period, whereas, you know, back in those days, not everyone had washing machines at home. Some of them were absolutely that you had to go to town and you had to go to these almost centralized areas. And this individual recognized where vulnerable people are occupied, not paying attention to their surroundings. They're focused on washing, folding, and they're not going to notice the individual that's there for whatever guise he's there as, maybe absolutely doing some washing of his own, or whatever his method of observation is from outside or within the laundry, and that they're preoccupied, and he can sit there and dream. And if he is triggered by certain individuals and he sees opportunity, would he seize upon that opportunity? Absolutely, and I believe so. And more than likely, with law enforcement that are so focused on him on this case, maybe not so much with the Garber, but with this lady, absolutely possible that I do think that this more likely will be of one of his other victims. All righty. We got any questions?
You do. You have a few.
All right.
All right. So we're going to start off with the blue light. Is it working? Blue light first. Miss Brenda donated a membership, and Junior Johnson got it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We appreciate all y'all's support.
We love that. All right. And then 63 Clocks made a comment about BTK's eyes. But when I went back, I couldn't find it.
Okay.
So there it is. And yes, I agree. They are awful. All right. So now let me jump back up here and catch up here. Let's see here. All right. And I was looking for one. Now I can't find it.
But we want to appreciate everybody being here tonight. We got a short, long week. I've been packing all week. I've got everything packed. I've talked to Chris. We've made plans as we move through next week, and I'm on the road. I'll leave on Labor Day. For all y'all that we want to thank y'all for everything y'all have done. And but I'll be on the road, and I will try to keep y'all as updated as possible as we are on the road. And like I said, we just thank everyone for assisting us.
All right. And another blue light. You got to move your head. No wonder I can't see my blue light. All right. For Mother of Dragons.
999 super sticker. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So there's that. All right. Let's do, my blue light was on. Okay. And from Molly at True Crime Web. I hear conflicting stories on the letter he sent regarding the two new victims. One that he sent in January and another that was sent in the 70s. Any idea?
I don't know about the one sent in January, but of course the one that was sent in the earlier days and of how many, and because, like I said, this individual here, just from his ability and desire of attention, and he knew how to communicate, and he wasn't getting the desired attention that he felt he deserved. And so, would he take certain risk? And like I said, he's in competition against these other offenders. And but no, I don't know about the one that was in January.
Okay. Caught up here.
I'll look at that though and see if I can find the link to that and see what it is. Because like I said, I don't know what it is right now.
All right. And this is from Dave. And you know I have to do this when it's to me. I told Steve the other night, no bear would mess with Steve knowing he knows Mrs. Steve.
Absolutely.
So there
Yes.
you go. So
yeah.
we should all have some bear stories next week, right?
Well, I hope not.
Okay. We'll see. All right. And from Miranda, all these victims should be identified by now. I'm tired of waiting for DNA to be processed. Why can't they get on with it? Oh,
Well,
I think
now,
I added a word.
Yes. Now, some of the missing cases are that were all of his victims discovered? Probably not. Will they be discovered? And this is not just for Dennis Rader, but it's going to be for Long Island. It'll be Golden State, Bundy. It doesn't matter whichever offender. Not all of the victims will be found. Not all the victims will be linked to one another because certain things occur and things get out of hand, and things can be misread by different agencies that they may overlook certain clues that in hindsight, oh, absolutely, it's 100%. If certain things were discovered or seen in the right light. And so, were there certain victims of his that have never been related to him? I believe so. And because, like I said, certain things may not have been, no matter how well organized they are, certain offenders and certain victims will do certain things that will absolutely stop that offender from being able to go along the path that this, no matter how controlling the offender is, that some people just push it and they do everything they can for that fight for survival, and it changes the type of scene as it's seen and evaluated by law enforcement, and the offender may have to take certain measures to protect themselves. Uh, uh, for the fact that the victim is absolutely turned the tables on them. And in some cases, it works out really well, but most cases not. But we always hope that some of these criminals that the tables are turned on them and that the victim is able to harm them, collect DNA that will lead to their capture.
Okay. And from Josh, they found some seeming bindings, right, at the laundromat?
Within the crime scene, that's what we're going to do. And when we get into some of the crime scenes, that we're going to look at each of the individual crime scenes and look at some of the things that he used as bindings. And of course, his name tells you everything that you need to know about this individual. BTK, from the bindings to the tortures to the homicides. And we have to take that literally for what it is. That if bindings are involved, he has to be a suspect, because there's a lot of homicides by a lot of different offenders that never bind their victims. And to bind a victim is for that you're doing and committing certain acts while they're alive. And you have to have control of them because you are a special sadistic type of personality. Um, some of the other offenders may um, uh, incapacitate their victims by uh, strangulation or blunt force, but this individual, BTK, he would bind his victims, and while they were still, because you really can't. The second part, the torture, if the victim is already deceased, of course, the torture isn't part of it. Now, it doesn't mean that he wouldn't go through the ritual of that if he made a mistake, but he wanted to see the fear. And during the interviews with some of the people that he was interviewed by, he discussed that it did excite him seeing the fear in their eyes. And this individual here, like I said, probably one of the most dangerous, most evil individuals that's ever walked this planet. And uh, so I don't give him just a body count of 10. I give him far more.
All right, and you've got some people that have jumped over here from Chris's.
Oh, hey, Chris.
Well, Chris ain't out here.
Oh,
just
okay.
some.
We want to thank everybody from the Mob Crew. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm going to be with Chris, and I promise to try to keep Chris away from the bears. But I'm looking forward. Hopefully, we do get to see a bear, but we don't want any interaction with it.
You don't need a photo op with a bear.
Chris does.
Well, Chris might.
He's got a wetsuit.
But Chris has a wetsuit?
Yeah.
All right. From Boston, at Steve. If meeting BTK on the street, would there be any way to detect who he really was?
Well, you have to look his eyes. This is Steve says eyes, but you have to look at how he was able to disguise and can keep himself absolutely under the radar his whole life. He worked a job either for the government, as when he was doing his K-9 duties, alarm systems, a U.S. Census worker, background of military, some college. And you have to look at everything that this individual did that put himself in an environment of where he could collect data and hone his skills of what he was doing to society and bringing fear into community. It wasn't just enough for him to drive and see the fear in these individuals that he was torturing. He wanted the whole community of not only just Wichita, because as he said, how do I get my name in the paper or some national attention? He wanted the whole country to be aware of him, and he would take whatever measures it would take. And he'd already thought about how many people will it take, and how will I link these up, and what steps do I have to take to make sure that I can bring fear not only to each individual that he targeted, but to that community, and then to the whole nation. And I think that he absolutely hates that he was in an era of not having the web out there to help get the word out about how evil he was. He would absolutely be in as full of himself right now if he could get the message out there with the way that the social media works now. And so he came along in a time period that about 30 to 40 years prior to what the attention he would get now if he was still out there.
I wasn't laughing at you. It was all Dave's fault.
What Dave do?
He said, "Have Chris play dead." It was all Dave's fault. I wasn't laughing at you. Okay, let's see here.
There will be a lot of bear jokes.
There will be a lot.
And my luck is that Chris will fall down, twist his knee, and everybody will blame me that if the bear gets him.
my gosh, that's funny. All right, so let me get this in here. And CJK has a story about BTK, but you probably need to get it from CJK first.
Sure. Send it to me.
Well, I don't have it. So CJK, if you can email Steve, he would love to hear your story. Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right. And let's see here. I think I'm done. Okay. All right. And 840 JDR. All right. And we have a blue light.
I'm going to send 50. Safe travel, Steve, and prayers you can bring answers. Thank you. I appreciate that. Very nice of you. Appreciate it. We'll use that in just a few days.
Okay. And off the subject for Miss Brenda, what is the status of Stephen Smith? I just asked him that the other night.
Yeah, we went through a list. We went down our list, and she says, "What have you?" And of course, the grand jury is still, and we haven't heard anything. The attorneys from my last thing I had seen about that is that they'd made that statement that Stephen's mother really just wants the answers, and that they had come to some conclusions that where he was found is where it happened. And so right now it's just up at what does all that mean? I really don't know yet, but hopefully we'll get some type of update soon. Okay. But it's still out there, grand juries.
All right. And from Junior, is BTK connected to more victims?
I absolutely believe so. Like I said, we have an individual over 17 years that he asked the question, how many victims do I have to get out there? And this was after he had been in it for about 6 years. And so how many victims did he have up until then? And we're going to look at all that. And as his travels and different parts of the country, I think we're going to find more victims.
Okay. And from Kathleen, does military or contract employees for military have to provide DNA?
Back that time period, probably not. I think now that they do collect DNA for certain military reasons as far as identification, but that's not as far used for criminal activities. It's more for if something happens. But back then, probably not. Especially in the early 70s, because I was in law enforcement and DNA really didn't come out as far as us looking at some of the cases until in the late 80s. And it was still so new edge and being introduced into the courts that it wasn't, and it was limited technology back then in science.
Okay. 843. All right. And this is from Joan. He seems to have a sweet deal where he is and would like to die there. I would love to see him transferred to Oklahoma. Does that happen if they being charges for DP but not a plea?
It depends. And that's a good point. I transported a prisoner that was from our county. I transported him to Florida. That he was up for death penalty here in Georgia. He didn't receive the death penalty, but he did receive a life without parole. But we had to transport him back to Florida to serve out his life sentence for his crimes in Florida. And as soon as he serves out his life sentence in Florida, he'll come to Georgia and he'll die in prison here in Georgia. But he was such a young offender that, of course, the jury wouldn't give him the that penalty. Now, was he truly an evil individual? Absolutely. And was he a great risk and is a great risk to individuals? Absolutely. But yes, he could be, some of these other states, if he doesn't sign a deal and is taken there and they have that evidence, hopefully at some point they will bring him and get justice for all his victims, which, like I said, they won't ever identify all his victims, I don't believe.
Okay. And from Josh, when Rader wrote that 1977 letter, when he says his name, is he referring to given name or BTK?
I would think more BTK, for the fact that he's all about fear. He likes seeing that fear, and he wants people to recognize and associate it, because he came up, he named himself. No one else named him. Nobody realized what he was. And so he came up and he has this, and he's, in his mind, being the narcissist that he is, it's all about this person, this individual that he's created, this evil that brings fear to the world. It's BTK. Absolutely. BTK is more important to him and his mind than his own name. BTK is what he would, if he could have a shirt with a name on it that he could walk down the street wearing it and not be prosecuted for, it would be BTK. If he could have a name tag, it would be BTK, because this is his name. This is what his whole fantasy is built around, is the fear that he can bring not only to his victims, but to the community and to the nation. And that's what, we try to rationalize and try to think like them, and it's impossible. These individuals, they look at us as not worthy to be in their presence, and our opinions mean nothing to them. And so you just have to deal with these individuals.
Okay. And from Dave, Steve, if they find out he is associated with a crime in Oklahoma, can they give him the DP?
I think I read where the daughter said that all he has to do is sign a paper that they're willing, and I don't know if it's on that case or not, that if he comes forth with more information on other victims, that they will not seek the DP. I hope that's not the case. But we'll just have to see. But yes, if he doesn't negotiate a deal, and certain states have where they can sentence him to that, then absolutely he can face it.
Okay.
And deserves it.
All right. And from C's Through at True Crime Web. So LE cannot get access to military DNA database?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a court proceeding and court issues about that. And I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I don't know about all the DNA databases out there. I don't know what the government's agreements are with if it's a crime committed on a military base, and does military police have access to those DNA profiles? I have no idea. But I wouldn't think in general that any law enforcement agency can go to a military base and say, run this against your military background. I don't think that. Now, can the courts, are there going to be ways that it could be done? Possibly. I just don't know what those steps are.
Okay. And that was it. But let me cruise through here and just deleted that one. Let's see here.
We got a few trolls out there now.
Yeah, I took care of one.
Mrs. Steve.
You know me. I'm just good that way. Let's see here. Miranda, he won't answer you, babe. He is no longer with us. All right, so we're good there. No more questions, but I do want to bring up Florida. We've had several folks mention
Yes.
Florida and what's going on down there. So
Yes.
absolutely prayers, great thoughts, good vibes, whatever the case might be. Steve's been in contact with Ruckus today, and you want to share?
Well, he was well supplied earlier in the day, and of course we have contingency plans. And I just right before I left came down, I sent him a message that if it gets past what his preparations are, absolutely let us know, and we'll see whatever supplies we can get down there to him. But hopefully um, everything works out, and everybody heeds the advice of the authorities, and take the necessary measures to uh, provide for their family safety. That's what we wish for and hope for.
Yep. Canvas and Crime is in Florida.
Okay.
I know Kamala's in Florida. So y'all please stay safe. Hunker down, like the dogs say.
Okay.
Right. So
All right.
anything else you need to share about your trips?
Oh no, like I said, we've been packing, and I've got probably 95% everything packed and ordered, and we got getting our testing up. And if you have any suggestions of any testing that you want, that I might not look at the right angle for Dior or for the campground, any type of acoustics, line of sight, other type of testing that can be done at that altitude, absolutely let me know. Send me an email, and or put it in comments. I'd appreciate it.
All right. And let's see here. I thought I had one. Miranda, Steve did answer your question about the victims being identified in DNA. Bamasin cracked me up about Poof. He was gone. Yeah, it don't take long. If we see one, we just get rid of them. It's not worth time and energy to, make them feel welcome. Let's see here. Hedgehog in space. I suggest local Waffle House quality testing.
Hedgehog in space. I love it.
When are you leaving, Steve? From Miss Kathleen.
Labor Day.
Labor Day. Okay. Okay.
I've got a few days up in the Midwest, in Indiana, and then I'll be heading west as soon as we get through with all our interviews and everything.
Okay. Yeah, Mother of Dragons said that they told Ruckus to get out. He will not budge.
No, I've been there to his place, and so I sent him as good a message as I can, and told him that as it deteriorates with weather, worst case scenario, if you realize that you've and it's getting worse than what you are prepared for, send me some messages, and we'll try to do what we can do.
That's it. All right. Oh, and one more blue light.
This is why we love Mrs. Steve. She cleans up the chat. Yes, she does.
It doesn't take long. I can promise you that. I ain't got time or energy for that mess.
And that's why she's staying here in Georgia. I don't want to do that to the Bears of Idaho. I don't think that we should mistreat the Bears in Idaho.
And Monique is, please, a reminder what case for suggestions. She's been on vacation.
It's the Dior Coons case out in Timber Creek, which is in Idaho, campground. A little 2-year-old, 27 months old, that went missing back in from on a camping trip with his mother and father, grandfather, and grandfather's friend in Timber Creek campgrounds in Idaho.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's see here. And Joey has a question. Hi, Steve. Hey, was wondering what you think of profilers who talk bad about other police officers and their handling of cases. Ooh.
Well, we have to hold law enforcement to a high standard. That's what we're trained for. And when officers don't do certain things, then if they misstep and they do things and they don't follow the protocols. There's protocols out there. I was held to extremely high standard. Because when you go to court, you get one shot at bringing evil to justice, and you have a job to do. And the if officers don't use their training and they don't find the steps because they've been trained for it, and if you do come across something that you're not trained to do, it's a real simple process. You stop what you're doing and you call in the pros, and you just have to, um, eat crow sometimes. That um, because it's far better for you to stop and not make any mistakes that will contribute to um, a criminal escaping justice due to something that you don't know how to process. And so you just have to sometimes just suck it up and call in the ones that do know and call in the ones that have the technologies. But there's profilers out there, and um, and I'll hold people accountable that if it's something simple and they have the training, and even if it's something that's extremely difficult, they know better than trying to do things that's above their pay grade. And we have to hold law enforcement to that for the fact that it's not just these victims in this one crime of where police have messed up. There's the potential that if you don't process it correctly, that criminal will continue along that same path and the victims will just mount up and stack up, and we can't have that. And so I believe in holding law enforcement to the highest standard that we can. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
All right. And then the best advice I've seen is from Mother of Dragons. Don't poke the bears.
I'm gonna tell
We'll
Chris
see.
that.
Yeah, make sure Chris knows that part. Okay. Let's see here. I think we're good.
All right. Well, we want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and y'all stay safe out there. We've got a couple more shows this week to do, and I look forward to that. And but we want to thank our mods and thank everyone that support this channel by views, thumbs up, sharing, liking, subscribing. It means a lot to us in this channel and allows us to go out and do things that we never thought that we would be able to do with this channel. And we want to thank y'all for that. So
All right.
Stay safe, and we'll see y'all soon.
Love y'all. You gonna leave that picture up? That one?
Mm-hmm.